Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris. Today I'm joined by a returning guest, someone who might just be the most frequent voice on this show other than me, Louise Hosking. Louise started her career as an environmental health officer and has gone on to work across membership organisations, policy and risk, including a stint as IOSH president. Since stepping away from full-time work at the end of last year, she spent the last 6 months digging into a question I put to her in a webinar we ran together. Why are we collecting more data and doing more work than ever, yet not seeing the outcomes to match it? That 6-month rabbit hole, as Louise called it, has led her somewhere fascinating. She calls it the choice chain, a way of understanding how the quality of the choices we make, individually and collectively, is what actually determines whether organizations get the outcomes they're chasing. We talk about the constellation of decisions behind major incidents, why good intentions so often don't translate into good outcomes, and how her environmental health roots are shaping a much bigger picture that connects safety, well-being, sustainability, and governance. Louise also shares what she's been working on with IRSM, the Capitals Coalition, and Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership, plus what's coming next as she takes on new board roles and heads out to speak at events this autumn. It's a brilliant conversation, so let's get into it with Louise Hosking.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week, we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints, and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Louise, it's lovely to see you back on the podcast again.
Hi, Christian, and thank you for inviting me back.
You might be the most frequent guest. I'm not sure. I'm thinking it must be either you or who else has been on a few times. James McPherson's been on a few times.
It hasn't. Yeah. It's always great to listen to.
Yeah, I'm trying to think who else may have been on. But anyway, you're up there, that's for sure.
No, well, I always enjoy having a good conversation with you, Christian.
Exactly. And if the eagle-eyed people who may have joined a previous episode that we did, as Louise pointed out, we're not wearing matching tops today, so that's good.
Yeah, that was the stripy day, wasn't it?
That was the stripy day, yeah. Back in those halcyon days of whatever it was, 2022 or something like that. Yeah. Oh, lots changed since then.
It has.
Lots changed since then. So I was keen to get you on to talk about what you've been up to recently, and particularly to talk about the choice chain.
Yeah.
So why don't you start by kind of giving us an overview of where that sort of idea came from and a bit of a, what is it? And let's dig into it and explore.
Yeah. So, I finished my last kind of full-time role at the end of last year, and I'd always anticipated, I'd take some kind of a break to work out what's going to come next. And then you contacted me, Christian, and said, come on a podcast. And it was you kind of set me on this rabbit hole, really.
It's all my fault.
The question you posed me was, and to all of us on the webinar was, we're doing more and more stuff, we're collecting more and more data, so why aren't we getting the outcomes that match that increased amount of effort? So that really, you gave me a problem that I've gone away for the last 6 months to really digest. And it started with the webinar that we recorded, which was great. And if you haven't looked at the webinar, it's on Christian's YouTube page, it's on my YouTube page as well. So that was where the choice chain was born. And following on from that webinar, I've been exploring, why is it that, good intentions don't follow through to positive outcomes? And I've really, I've been doing this for 35 years now, and I know I don't look it.
Not at all, no.
Yeah, but I'm a first careerer, so I began my life as an environmental health officer.
Yeah.
And I've worked across a wide range of sectors. I've worked, people know me as the IOSH president, so I've worked in membership organisations, I've worked in policy, I've, worked across every sector looking at risk. So I've really taken the time out to, work out what is it that's gone right and what has gone less right, and how can I support our network and others with something I hope is new.
Fantastic. Well, I have to say, when I posed that question, I didn't expect it to be a 6-month homework assignment, but I I appreciate the dedication and the diligence that you put into it, Louise. I really, really do. And I think as we'll explore, the result of that is really interesting and valuable. So on behalf of everybody, thank you for doing that. Before we dig into what you've kind of come up with, what would you say would be the most surprising thing that you've kind of discovered or rediscovered, or a light bulb moment that you maybe weren't expecting that come out of this process?
I think that the light bulb, and we will come on to this, so it's kind of looking, it's real future scanning. So where are we going in the future? And I also, at the start of the year, I embarked on some learning. So I did a fantastic course with the Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership, which is part of Cambridge University. So I'm back in Cambridge now. And they are very focused on purpose and what creates a purpose-driven organization. And so I've really dug into that. And I think, my light bulb moment has, very much been, I've kind of gone back to my environmental health roots. So we'll dig into that a bit later on, because for me, environmental health really brings everything together. And ultimately, we are here to create wellbeing across, people, across our organizations and across the planet. So bringing in that environmental health piece, if you like, has kind of been that light bulb moment. And I've actually connected with people at CISL, and you'll love this, Christian, but I started my life as an environmental health officer here at Cambridge, in a place called Mandela House that's on Regent Street in Cambridge, for anybody who knows it. And CISL is directly opposite. So I've had a couple of meetings, really productive meetings there as well. And so I've gone from one side of the road in Cambridge around the world and back to the other side of the road, which has been really interesting.
A long winding journey to end up across the road.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. So let's get into then what the choice chain is. I guess maybe to start with, you've talked about a constellation of decisions. So is that a good starting point for kind of explaining where you're going with it?
So I haven't got a massive slide deck, but I just thought it would probably help to just share a couple of slides. So
what we'll do for anybody who's listening to this rather than watching it on YouTube, if you do listen to the podcast, it is available on YouTube as well, so you could always go to YouTube and look at the slides, but we'll put them in the show notes as well.
Yes, absolutely. So I've just pulled together a couple of slides. So the first piece for me is and this I started to really think about this. We talk about leadership. So when things go wrong, we need better leadership. But I've been asking the question, well, what is that better leadership? So if I'm a board or a CEO or in the executive team or a manager, what does that actually mean? So that's one of the questions that I've been been looking to really unpick. So this is where this constellation of decisions comes in. But before we kind of move on to that, I really want to define where I see the choice chain fitting. So we talked at the top of the year about reporting and data. So for me, reporting, assurance, data, that helps us to understand exactly where we are currently. Our purpose, and every organization will have its purpose, tells us where we want to go. So that's our North Star, if you like. The choice chain is about choices, and it's the quality of the choices that we make which ultimately determines whether we get there or not. So and particularly because I was studying with the CISL and I was looking at this as well, is that I started to look across some of the really big disasters that have happened. And we all know the kind of domino effect is that, negative outcomes rarely happen because of one choice or one decision. It's generally a multitude of issues that have arisen. And we all remember, if you take one of the dominoes out, that event potentially isn't going to happen. So I wanted to explore that side of it, which is where this constellation of decisions really comes from. But it is what came back to me, really looking at some of these significant events, is it is about the quality of choices. So people can make quite rational decisions in isolation, but actually it's a combination of those decisions that can result in a negative or a positive outcome. So I've also been talking to people that I've worked with in the past, where we've worked really, really well together and we've had positive outcomes, and why that is as well. So it's not just looking at negative outcomes, but it's looking at, actually, as an organization, how can we use the choice chain to promote positive outcomes as well?
Yeah, it's definitely important to look at when things go right, because I think the natural inclination of people is something's gone wrong, we need to investigate why, whether that's within the safety context or within a business context, or within any other context. But actually, if you think about it, most of the time we're doing things successfully from a health, safety, and well-being perspective, aren't we? And most of the time, people get up in the morning and they get themselves ready and they travel to work and they work and then they pack up and they travel home and then they have a normal day. So the vast majority of the time, things are going well. And I think sometimes we don't spend enough time reflecting on what are those choices, as you say, that have driven things to go well. We focus too much on when things have gone badly.
Yeah, so I caught up with a MD that I used to work with, who's just set up another company, and we had a really detailed conversation about we worked really well together, and his mature in terms of health, safety, and risk maturity in his previous organization. We enhanced that massively. So at the same time as I've been looking across my career at where things, haven't gone quite so well, I've also been considering those organizations that I've worked with where it's gone incredibly well. and it's kind of been embedded. And so, you know, all of that has come together to really create this work. And by the way, these are things that we all know. So I'm probably not talking about anything new. The whole point is that we're making it more visible, and we're making it visible in a language that those working alongside us can understand. Because I think, you know, certainly early on, and we'll come on to talk about the articles I've been writing, you know, we hear again and again, well, the business only cares about money or finance. I personally believe that's rarely the case. I think organizations and leaders are faced with so much complexity that's where their challenge sits. And I think if we can make visible what we know, which is what the work that I've been progressing and working to do, I think this is going to help us all. So it brings us on to this constellation of decisions. So again, those of you that are listening on the podcast can't see it, but there are a number of factors that really come together. So this isn't about a linear chain. So when organizations make decisions, whether it be at board level, at executive level, or further down, those decisions and choices are all shaped by a range of factors. So the diagram that's in front of us here is really starting to break down what those factors are. And the work that I'm going to be doing is going to be helping organizations to determine what those factors are that lead to positive or negative outcomes. And just like risk, it can be positive or negative. So every star in the constellation matters. No one star explains the whole picture. But when you actually take a step back, a pattern can emerge. So as we kind of pull back, we can start to see a pattern. And fundamentally, we navigate, don't we, via stars. So if we can understand this within our organizations and how all of these factors are working together or not, then we can start to understand the choice chain within our organizations. So I'm not going to go through everything in here, and but I am going to pick out a few areas. So purpose I have talked about, and organizations need to have a really clear purpose. And you know, the CISL learning that I did was great for this. So, you know, we know, and there's studies that have been out there, that organizations that really do just focus on shareholder value and profits don't have the longevity of organizations that are more focused on a being purpose-led and understanding what their purpose is behind what they're effectively delivering for their customers. So
it makes good logical sense, doesn't it? That, because even if you think about attracting and retaining staff, you know, if you're sort of you'd have to be a certain type of person, and these people would exist, but for example, to work in an investment bank where it is all about the money, and I'm sure they do other things as well, but really fundamentally that's the core thing, right? It's to make loads of money, and that's great if that's what you want to do. But actually, most businesses, you know, to get the right sort of talent and to keep the right sort of talent, you know, they're not driven. People aren't driven by just that. They want to feel like they're doing something worthwhile and valuable, as well as earning some money, don't they?
Yeah, 100%. But even the big investors now, Christian, and I'm doing some great work with Capitals Coalition on this as well. Those big investors are looking for organizations that are purpose driven. So I mean, crikey, we're in the middle of a summer and I'm in one of the dry spots in the country, haven't seen rain for weeks and weeks and weeks, and those same investors, and reputational risk is a very real thing now. So even those investors are looking much more at purpose than ever before.
Yeah.
So signals are, so that's the warning signs. So warning signs can come through organizations in a variety of different ways. And again, this is something that I've been exploring and thinking about. Why is it that some signals carry more weight than others? So one of the articles that I've written actually looks at financial signals and why, there's kind of leadership psychology behind some of this, is that money and finance is a universal indicator of success, potentially. So certainly the work that we're doing in Capitals Coalition is looking at how we put value on the things that we know are really important, but also how organizations give weight to what I call whispers. So it's those quiet signals that are coming through the organization, and how do we hear those signals and create that equity? Interpretation is a really interesting one, and I'm sure people listening to this podcast will understand this. This is the situation where you may be working on something, the legal background behind what you're doing. There could be some really clear information on how you solve an issue or a problem, or what weight you give to that issue or a problem. But it has to then go through levels within the organization to get clarity, to get sign off, whatever it is. And during that process, your request is being interpreted, and that interpretation can potentially lead to success or not. So James Pomeroy at the moment is doing some great work on language, and in the first webinar we talked about translation, didn't we? So that's where what you're saying can lose weight as well. Trade-offs, most organizations, this isn't about black and white sign-offs. So our leaders are working in massively complex environments. So we're talking about AI, we're talking about geopolitics, we're talking about climate change. All of these pieces of the puzzle are coming at them in one go. There are trade-offs. So if we want to invest in an area that is important, where we feel is really important, there's a trade-off to be had in respect of that. So trade-offs are important.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, safety is our number one priority as a phrase, whether that's a good phrase or a bad phrase, we won't discuss. But if you think about it logically, if safety were the absolute number one priority, then lots of work would never be done. So there has to be a trade-off, because you can't guarantee 100% safety other than by sitting still and not doing anything. So there's always trade-off, aren't there?
Yeah. I'm going to come back to choices. Choices are fundamentally what, so a choice that somebody makes can affect the constellation again.
Yeah.
Learning, we should all be in a learning organization, but again, learning is an investment as well.
Yeah.
So for me, the conditions and the outcomes are also important. So conditions could be around psychological safety within an organization. It could be around accountability. it could be how the organization is structured. It could be personal conditions, so whether people feel trusted, whether they feel capable. When I talk about environmental health, there's environmental conditions as well, and also financial conditions. So, you know, if you're working in an environment where the organization is going through short-term financial challenges, that's going to alter our constellation as well. So, and investor confidence. So I guess these are all things that we know, but in creating this kind of piece of work, if you like, it's giving visibility to that and giving visibility to your audience in a way that they can understand it, and helping organizations to really think about, you know, what is your constellation, what is your choice chain.
Love it. Great model. You know me, I love a good model and a framework. Could you, I'm sure as you've been thinking a lot about this over the past few months, I mean, could you think of an example where you've kind of overlaid the choice chain and look back historically, either with a good outcome or a not so good outcome, and just without going through, you know, every single piece, but just kind of bring some color to that with a real life sort of example.
Yeah. I mean, so I've been, as part of the CISL learning, we looked at some really big, you know, some of the big issues of the day. So things like the Carillion breakdown in terms of governance. You know, those kind of, you can look at the big financial crash at the end of 2000 as well. So a lot of these conditions are created where you may have really strong stakeholders. So you could have your shareholders as really strong stakeholders that are just interested in short-term investment. And if you have a scenario like that, your choice chain is going to be pulled into short-term financial outputs, if you like. And so I mean, I perhaps should have prepared for that question, Christian, but
that's okay. No, sorry.
To come back. But I think the best scenarios that I can give you are some of these really big issues that have occurred. And looking back at those, I mean, some of the there was a massive dam collapse, and we looked at that, and that was an example where somebody, you know, an engineer has said there are issues with this dam, you know, significant structural issues, and their warning, you know, that warning signal didn't find its way to the decision makers in the way that it should have done. And, you know, environmentally and from, you know, a people perspective as well, that was a major disaster. So I've really been looking at why some of these really big events happen, because I think that we can translate that into our everyday work.
So a couple of things I was keen to sort of dig into. One was around people, in terms of, you know, there are lots of choices being made throughout every organization, you know, minute after minute, hour after hour, day after day, etc. So who and what gets heard when decisions are made, I think, is a really interesting thing to think about.
Yeah. So following on from your webinar that sent me on this massive rabbit hole, Christian, I started creating a series of articles called the Choice Chain, and for anybody who's interested, you can look at those on my LinkedIn page, and I have actually set them up on a Substack page as well. So I think it was probably the first article that I wrote following your webinar. So I wrote a kind of general piece that coincided with your webinar. And the next article that I wrote was something that I've called signal equity. So it's how signals travel through organizations and how they're given the right weight. So you could have a scenario, which I've certainly come across, and I'm sure listeners will have come across before as well, where you have particularly vocal actors within an organization. So you have people that are very, very passionate about their perspective. And as an organization, how you give that weight next to somebody where, you know, I call it giving weight in whispers. And I used to talk about this when I was chair of council at IOSH as well, is that sometimes it's the quiet thinkers that have got the best ideas. So how do you balance the weight of those signals? And so this is all about leaders understanding where their signals are coming through the organization and where that may be mismatched. And I've done a lot of work in the past in terms of stakeholder engagement and how we create really balanced stakeholder engagement. I could do an entire podcast on that, Christian. And how we hear through from stakeholders and then balance those views in the right way is the secret sauce, I think.
And thinking back to kind of the constellation and considering I suppose context. I don't know if context is one of the words in there, but if you think about, you know, somebody condition, somebody who is, that was just my word that came to me, somebody who might be, you know, a sort of I'm just thinking of an example from my history, you know, somebody who's in a sort of mid-level position and overseeing certain operation within the business. You know, they might be screaming and shouting about something. It could be quite easy to sort of say, well, yeah, but they don't have that full understanding of this and this and this and this, and therefore sort of downplay what they're saying. So I think part of that skill is sifting through and giving that sort of perspective, isn't it? And trying to understand, you know, the person and the context. And as you say, are they a shouty person who's often complaining and maybe you don't put as much weight on it? But, you know, these are some of the choices that we have to make, is how to deal with that kind of scenario, isn't it?
Yeah, and I really could talk about stakeholder engagement for an entire hour. But, you know, part of the work that I've done, you know, in all of the organizations that I've worked in, and actually this started when I was at Savills, crikey, in the early 2000s, is thinking about how you can create stakeholder groups that create, you know, that are psychologically safe places for people to be able to discuss issues and help with that prioritization piece.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that we did in IOSH when I was chair of council there as well. And I think what we have now in AI means that we can potentially take much more information that we had before and really, you know, kind of fine tune that so that we can hear those signals coming through if we use the AI in the right kind of way. You know, there are opportunities that are coming through because, you know, our technological ability is shifting as well, I think.
But I guess on the flip side to that, there is a risk of too much information. So more information doesn't necessarily lead to better decisions and better outcomes.
Yeah, and this was the whole crux of the problem that you threw at me, wasn't it? And you know, again, is this approach, so this choice chain approach, and really making these things visible is going to help you to prioritize, so that, you know, because you're going to understand your trade-offs, you're going to, you know, think about your learning, you're going to, I'm looking at the constellation again, you're going to focus on the purpose, so it will help you to prioritize. So I always work in threes. So, you know, what are the top 3 things that you can do that will potentially solve the 333 things below?
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, that was the crux of the question, wasn't it? And it's
Yeah.
I think it's one that people, you know, do need to grapple with. So, you know, hopefully people are getting some good value from this. Did you want to talk about the other couple of articles that you've done recently, Louise?
Yeah, so yeah, no, what else have I been up to? So yeah, so I've written a series of articles that are you know, you can access, but I'm really pleased to I've been working quite a lot with IRSM. So IRSM are very focused on general risk. So
Yeah.
so their approach is really matching all of this. And I'm hoping that come the autumn, I'm going to be doing some work with IRSM actually in Cambridge and looking at this type of approach and risks in terms of biosafety, which will blow your mind, Christian. It's fascinating. So I've actually got an article out in Sentinel magazine this month. So if anybody's a member of IRSM, you'll be able to have a look at my article in there. And also I'm working with Mark Glover again, who is editor of the International Health and Safety Journal, and people will know Mark because he used to be the editor of SHP. And everybody loved SHP. So I'm writing regularly for them as well. And the article that's out with International Health and Safety Journal is looking at is looking much more at sustainability. And you know, how organizations approach sustainability as well. So I'm really enjoying writing again, and everything's kind of fine-tuned around this whole process of how we make choices.
Yeah. We're going to have Rosie from IRSM on the podcast soon. We had to postpone a couple of times, sadly. And I had an article in that the first of those new magazine that Mark's working on as well. So definitely
Well,
high quality.
Yeah, so actually so one of the areas that I'm looking at is that I'm working now, you know, I've got an extensive network and you know, still communicate with people across LinkedIn on a regular basis. But I think where this work is now, you haven't heard me talk about health and safety a lot, have you, in this podcast? So this for me is about risk, it's about choices. Yeah, IRSM have got some of the work they're doing, it matches where I'm going with this much more, and it means that I'm going out to a whole new network. So I'm starting to have conversations with the research sector here in Cambridge. I'm also embarking on 2 board level roles in September. One of which is my old sixth form college, which I'm really excited about, because you know, if it hadn't have been for me getting dragged through doing A levels at sixth form, I probably wouldn't be talking to you now. So really looking forward to that. But yeah, it's reaching out to a new network. So I'm going to be networking with non-exec directors, and I'm joining networks there as well. And certainly through the Capitals Coalition are talking to people in accountancy. Governance is really important. So hence I've been studying a lot around governance and how decisions are made in organisations. But it's all tied to this. How can I get my message across?
Yeah. Great stuff. You mentioned at the start that you began your career in environmental health, and I think that's a really interesting framing for this. So, what does environmental health help us to see about how kind of there might be some gaps in what we kind of think about in terms of organizational structures? You know, what sort of insight, what can that shine on the way we make these choices that could improve outcomes potentially?
Yeah, so I'm gonna share another slide now, and I'll explain this for the people on the. So this is a good exercise, isn't it, in explaining things for. Right, so hopefully, right, where are we? Oh, all my screens have got confused.
Oh dear, that's
So
what
just
happens,
bear
isn't
with me. I work off 3 screens, which is probably a bit greedy, but
it?
right, okay. So hopefully, can you see that? Is that working?
It's not. Here we go. Yeah.
How's that? Okay. Okay, so yeah. So I began my career in environmental health, and that's always been my foundation. And Stuart Hughes, who I think he was 2 presidents after me at IOSH, he came from an environmental health background as well. And we always talked about the fact that it's kind of, health and safety was part of what we did. But certainly when COVID came around, that background that we had, we just knew what we had to do. So environmental health is absolutely at my core. It always has been. And I always think back to even like my first week at uni. So I studied environmental health at Nottingham Trent a rather long time ago. And one of the things that the lecturer said at the time is that progress that we've made in terms of public health, clean water, disease prevention, making sure that, people have decent places to live, the integrity and safety of our food, safe workplaces, which we all understand, and protecting the environment, so pollution to air, water and land, they have saved lives. That's the prevention piece right at the top, if you like, and that's what really this circle is all about. So I've kind of come full circle around on this, and in having conversations with global organizational leaders and thinking about purpose, and I had some great discussions when I was studying with CISL, is when we look at purpose and what we are all here to do, it is well-being is at the top of the list. It has to be. An organization can make all the money in the world, but actually, if the people within it are unwell and unhealthy, kind of what's the point? And what we're going through in terms of climate change at the moment is there for everybody to see. Right now, parts of our world are literally burning. So the well-being of the planet has to be part of our purpose. And when you look at this through an environmental health lens, it's all interconnected. So environmental health is about, people think of environmental health officers very much in one of these circles, but I'm arguing for bringing it back to the whole again, because it is all interconnected. So
Yeah.
as an example, we could have a factory or an organization that's creating air pollution. So they're pumping out lots of toxic waste. Now, the people that are more likely to be affected by that air pollution are people that are perhaps lower paid, they are in lower socioeconomic groups, and
Yeah.
they're living in areas where that pollution affects them the most. And we know that there are links, there's been studies done to show links between air pollution, anxiety, and also how that affects children and pregnancy, even before pregnancy. So you can start to see how all of these health factors are connected.
Mm.
And, we cannot we cannot continue to damage people's health in perhaps, the way that we have. But if we look at things through an environmental health lens, it's about protecting people in work and beyond the factory gates. It's about bringing our communities together. And so for me, this is kind of the next layer. So particularly for those organizations that are, they've already perhaps gone beyond compliance, actually understanding the impacts that they're making through an environmental health lens, for me, is the next stage of really being purpose driven.
Mm. Would you say that should apply then to, the people that are likely to be joining us are safety, risk management professionals of different seniority levels, but should they be trying to think more broadly as well about some of these environmental health aspects?
Yeah, and it's already happening. So,
Mm.
I talk about organizational maturity a lot as well. So, we have to start where we are. You have to go through those steps. And this whole piece around environmental health really is kind of like the well beyond compliance piece, but this is
Yeah.
something that organizations are doing.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm finding is that even, you've got people who manage sustainability that do the green stuff for organizations. They do the ESG reporting.
Mm-hmm.
You've got HR doing, people well-being. You've got, operations, making sure that we're delivering, and it can become siloed. So the work that I'm doing is trying to help organizations and help leaders to really integrate this and to see that integration. So it's
Yeah.
making it much more visible.
Yeah.
But if you talk to some of the really big organizations, they are doing this because they know there's reputational risk attached to, inequality within workers. And as our supply chains and value chains, travel around the world, if you're a large global corporate, understanding where your reputational risk might poke its head out, this is a good lens to look at all of that through.
Mm. I was chatting to somebody who relatively recently retired from a quite senior role in an insurance company the other day, and he said that the reality is that if somebody gets a 20k claim or a 20k fine, even, and they're £1 billion business, they're not really. It's not going to change anything too much. Whereas reputational risk, that
It's
is
massive.
fundamental. So I guess what you're saying is that this environmental health approach can be that kind of bridge to link safety, well-being, sustainability, and governance to stop those silos.
Yeah, and it's very much kind of the next stage. And I work I've been working with the Capitals Coalition for some time, and the Capitals, again, look at the website. They're doing some really great work to actually value some of these interactions so that we can create a positive value. So if we think about organizations that have got people inside them that feel motivated, that feel empowered, that feel well, those organizations are more healthy and they're going to be more profitable. So the Capitals Coalition is working to really understand those connections and put some values on it. So it's a social return on investment, effectively. And that's where, unfortunately, we've that's the issue. That I think that's the challenge that we face, is that financial signals carry more weight. So if we can translate what we're doing into some of those financial signals, which the Capitals Coalition is working on, that's going to be the piece that really starts to bring all of this together.
Yeah, fantastic. So drawing to a close then, Louise.
Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing that.
What could somebody who's joined us today go away and sort of what could or should they do differently in terms of thinking about that constellation of choices? How could they make those choices more visible, and how could they use the choice chain in a sort of practical sense? What would you advise people to go away and do as a result of this?
So I think the work that I've been doing on this is I keep coming back to, it's about how organizations make choices. And I guess my advice is to consider your choice chain. What is it perhaps that you're looking to achieve, and what is the choice chain? And thinking of those elements from the constellation, what is it that you can do to influence your organizations to have better conversations? Because if you have better conversations and can improve the conditions that those conversations are taking place in, because they're psychologically safe conversations, that will start to result in better choices. And it, out of all of this, it is those choices that are being made that influence those outcomes. So really understanding what that choice chain is, I think it's not about a new framework or a new way of doing things. It's here and designed to help people to really make this visible. It's why leadership is struggling. We can't just say, oh, we need better leadership. It's how can we support and help leaders to do that?
Makes sense. And finally then, if somebody has an important decision to make, what would you suggest as a good question for them to sort of pose to themselves and think about before they go away and make that choice?
I think is, you've got to reflect at the top. The North Star is always going to be your purpose. So it comes back to that right at the beginning. We were saying we need reporting, we need data. That tells us where we are now. The purpose tells us where we want to go, but the choices that we make is how we're going to get there. So it's really understanding what your choice chain is, because ultimately we need to improve health, well-being, lives, our community, the environment, and if we can create much more balance with financial health, we're going to achieve success across all of our organizations.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I'm changing one conversation at a time to one decision at a time, Christian.
There you go. Perfect. Well, perfect. Great. Well, thank you so much, Louise. Where can people learn more? What should people do? any plugs you want to make, feel free.
Yeah, no. So have a look at my articles, which are on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Louise A. Hosking, I come up as. My website will be live by the time this goes out.
Nice.
So www.thechoicechain.co.uk. So have a look at my website. And I am speaking to event organisers as we speak, and I'm going to be out on the road over the
Pounding the
autumn.
pavements to espouse the virtues of the choice chain. I love it. Yeah,
out on the road, and I'm really looking towards People's Sustainability Conference in December, where I'm going to be talking about the environmental health connection in particular. So how we can protect health in the workplace, but also how that connects with what's going on in our communities too.
Fantastic.
So,
Well, I'll look forward to that because I'll be there. I'll be there in London for those 2 days as well. So,
excellent.
I'll holler at you in the audience and cheer along and all that sort of stuff.
But yeah, no, and just follow me on LinkedIn because I've got a lot that's going to kick off in September. So I've been quiet for a reason.
Well, you've been doing your homework.
I have been doing my homework, but yeah, coming back in September, and if anybody needs any support or help within their organisation, that's how you can get in contact with me.
Fantastic. And for any parents out there like me who struggle to get their kids to do their homework, feel free to use this as an example.
Yeah, it's just like, and the articles have I've written one article, the next one's coming. So you'll have to, at some point, Christian, the question will be, when's the book coming out?
Indeed, there we go. Well, I set the task to Crystal Danbury to get her book done because she and Elisa interviewed me on their podcast, and I talked about being in the Zero Books Club and the hashtag Zero Books Club. This was before my book, excuse me, had been published, and I was at an event the other week at Olympia, and Crystal was on a panel with Stuart and Rosie, both of whom we've mentioned today as well. And she said, she referenced her book, and she said, stay Christian, I'm going to no longer be in the Zero Books Club. So, well, one step at a time, but I'm sure there is a good book in this.
Yeah, but no, thank you for all that you do in raising the profile of all of us in the profession, and for continuing to ask me to come on your podcast, which I always enjoy. I am a little bit rusty. I've been out of practice, but I'm back.
We couldn't tell, don't worry. We couldn't tell.
But no, thank you very much.
Good stuff. All right. Thanks, Louise. And thank you who joining us today for coming along on this journey with Louise and I. We will see you again next week for another episode of the podcast.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.